Greetings class! Welcome to Duel Academy. ProfessoRivas here, and this will be the second lesson of your second class in your raw yellow term, YGO Game Terminology, Game State Terms. If you haven't already, please make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell to be up to date with the latest Duel Academy lessons and assessments. So without further ado, get your deck, get your game on, and let's get started. Advantage: the amount of cards one player has relative to another. Generally, the player with more cards is seen as the one with better advantage. There's both hand advantage, which is when a player has more cards in their hand than their opponent, and field advantage, which is when a player has more cards on their field than their opponent. Having more cards creates advantage because it allows for a player to have more options than their opponent. Beatstick: a monster with high attack relative to its level, rank, or link rating. In the Normal Monsters lesson in our Introduction to Monsters class, we discussed how monsters generally follow a scale on how strong it could be based on its level. A beatstick is a monster who is either at the top of that scale or surpasses it. An example would be Gene Warped Werewolf, which is a level 4 beatstick with 2000 attack. Book: flipping a monster to face down defense position. This nickname comes from Book of Moon, which effect is to flip a monster face down defense position. Board: the player's field. You may hear a player say they need to set up their board, which just translates to set up their field. Or you may hear a player say they have an unbreakable board, which translates to their field being filled with strong monsters with strong effects, specifically effects that protect their monsters and effects that negate the effects of their opponent's monsters. Ceiling: a deck's maximum potential power at its disposal. Cost: an action that must be performed in order to activate a card or effect. A card's cost can be found before a semicolon. An example of cost can be found on the card Exiled Force, where the card states, you can tribute this card, then target one monster on the field. Destroy that target. The cost is before the semicolon, which is to tribute this card, while the effect is to destroy that target. Dead card: a card with no ability to impact the game. In other words, a card that is offline because it cannot be used. An example of this would be having Harpy's Feather Duster when your opponent has no spells or traps on the field. Since Harpy's Feather Duster cannot be activated, it is a dead card. Blink: to make an opponent's card have little to no value. An example of this would be getting your opponent down to 1000 life points while they have Mirror Wall on the field. Since Mirror Wall requires a maintenance cost of 2000 life points, the cost cannot be paid, leaving it to be destroyed. Engine: a number of cards that help a deck achieve a certain action or helps a player draw a good card. We discussed engines in our Deck Building 101 class. Feel free to review that lesson. Turbo: a related term involving bringing out a strong monster from the deck or extra deck in one turn, using as few cards in the hand as possible. An example would be Utopia Turbo, where you can use a card like Tin Goldfish to quickly special summon another level 4 monster like Gene Warped Werewolf to have 2 level 4 monsters required to XZ summon into number 39 Utopia, which can then be used to XZ summon number S39 Utopia the Lightning. Flexible: the quality of a card being effective in a variety of situations. An example of a flexible card would be Book of Moon, which states, target one face-up monster on the field, change that target to face-down defense position. Although the effect seems simple, it is useful in a variety of ways. If an opponent wants to use their monsters as synchro, XZs, or link materials, book one of the monsters to prevent the summon. If your opponent wants to activate a powerful monster effect, book the monster to prevent the activation. If your opponent has a monster with a high attack below defense, book the monster to get over it easier. Floater: a monster that generates card advantage either when it's summoned or when it leaves the field. In the case of the latter, typically replacing itself with another card on the field. An example would be Ra's Disciple, which states, When this card is summoned, you can special summon up to 2 Raw Disciples from your hand and/or deck. With the summon of 1 Raw's Disciple, you're able to have all 3 on the field, creating advantage. Another example would be Cimoooooooo, which states, if this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, gain 1000 life points. Then, you can special summon any number of Cimoooooooo from your deck in face-down defense position. So, if one would be destroyed, it replaces itself with up to 2 copies of itself, creating advantage. Floodgate, a card that restricts one or both players from performing certain actions. Examples include There Can Only Be One, Gozen Match, Rivalry of the Warlords, Royal Decree, and the list goes on and on. Although they are all different cards, they all have the ability to restrict certain actions. Fodder, a card that is used solely as a tribute, material, or for costs. FTK/OTK, first turn kill and 1 turn kill, respectively. An FTK is when you win on the first turn of the duel through either 1. Deck out, which is when your opponent has no cards in their deck to draw from, 2. Depleting your opponent's life points to 0 from burn damage, or 3. Drawing Exodia. An OTK is similar to an FTK in the sense that you win the duel on a single turn. However, it is done past the first turn of the duel. Generic, usually referring to materials required to summon monsters from the extra deck, as the opposite of specific. Any fusion monster that does not list specific monsters as fusion material can be considered generic, even though other properties will be specified, such as type, attribute, or ability, such as Starving Venom Fusion Dragon, which requires 2 dark monsters on the field as opposed to 2 specific monsters. A generic synchro monster is one that simply requires 1 tuner and 1 or more non-tuner monsters. For example, Stardust Dragon. A generic Xyz monster is one that simply requires 2 or more monsters of the same level. For example, number 39 Utopia. A generic Link monster, referring to Link 2 or higher monsters, is one that simply requires 2 or more monsters as Link material. For example, Firewall Dragon. Grind game. A situation where both players are making a minimal amount of moves and neither player can pull ahead. This usually happens when both players have little to no resources left. Therefore, both players are grinding until one has accumulated enough resources to make a play. OPT, once per turn. There is both soft once per turn and hard once per turn. A card with a soft once per turn can activate its effect 1 time that turn per copy. An example of this would be a card like Tornado Dragon. Its effect reads, once per turn, quick effect, you can detach 1 material from this card, then target 1 spell or trap on the field, destroy it. If you have 1 copy of Tornado Dragon on the field, you can detach 1 material to target and destroy 1 spell or trap on the field. However, if you have 2 copies of Tornado Dragon on the field, you can use each copy's effect once that turn, so you'll be able to destroy 2 spell or traps. A card with the hard once per turn can only activate its effect 1 time, regardless of how many copies you have. An example would be Sangan. Its effect reads, if this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, add 1 monster with 1500 or less attack from your deck to your hand, but you cannot activate cards or the effects of cards with that name for the rest of this turn. You can only use this effect of Sangan once per turn. Notice how the word Sangan is in quotations. This means that even if you have multiple copies of Sangan destroyed in 1 turn, you can only activate its effect 1 time. Hand Trap, a monster whose effect activates from the hand. Some popular hand traps include Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, Drone Lockbird, DD Crow, and many more. All of these monsters are quick effect monsters that activate from the hand. Inherent, unofficial term for a type of summon that neither requires an activation nor starts a chain. Synchro, Xyz, Pendulum, Link summons, and Contact Fusion are all considered inherent special summons because their own mechanic allowed them to summon themselves. Regular fusion summoning is not an inherent special summon because it requires a card like Polymerization to fusion summon. Mirror Match. Two opposing decks using the same archetype, strategy, or theme. Missing the timing. The inability to activate a card or effect when it would meet its activation timing because it is not possible to activate it. Stylized as when X, you can Y. A very detailed explanation of missing the timing by the Yugi tuber Cimoooooooo will be posted in the description below. OP. Overpowered, broken, or busted. A card that is too powerful compared to other cards. An example of an OP card is Red Eye's Dark Dragoon. This powerful boss monster cannot be destroyed by card effects, cannot be targeted by card effects, can destroy one monster your opponent controls while dealing damage equal to its original attack, and has the quick effect of negating the activation or effect of a card by paying the cost of discarding one card. Plus, it destroys the card once the activation or effect is negated. Plus, Dragoon gains 1000 attack when it does. Talk about broken. Out, or the out. Specific card or cards that can be used to effectively counter either other card or cards or specific play or plays by your opponent. For example, if your opponent has Mystic Mine on the field, which is a field spell, the out may be Cosmic Cyclone, which banishes a spell card by paying the cost of 1000 life points. Pile. A stack of cards, usually graveyard. Removal. Any means of removing a card, usually monsters, from the field. Examples of monster removal would be cards like Raigeki, Fissure, and Smashing Ground. Row. Series of card zones, with the front row referring to main monster zone and the back row referring to spell and trap zone. Back row removal. The act of removing spell and trap cards from the field. Some examples of back row removal would be cards like Cosmic Cyclone, Twin Twisters, and Harpy's Feather Duster. Rogue. A deck that sees little to no play in a competitive environment. Rhoda. A card effect that adds a card from the deck to the hand, named after Reinforcement of the Army. May also be referred to as a searcher. Spell Speed 4. An unofficial term that describes a card with the your opponent cannot activate cards or effects in response to this effect's activation in the text. Examples of cards that have a spell speed 4 are Super Polymerization, Dark Ruler No More, and Forbidden Droplet. Win More. A card that has no impact on the outcome of a game when you are already winning. An example of this would be Pot of Avarice. This card states, target 5 monsters in your graveyard, shuffle all 5 into the deck, then draw 2 cards. This is essentially a dead card on turn 1 since you'll have no monsters in your graveyard. Therefore, this card is mainly used mid to late game when your strategy and combos are already in motion and you're already in a winning position. Thank you so much for attending this class. There will be a quiz in this lesson, so don't forget to take it. I hope you have a great day, and class dismissed.